I woke up early that Thanksgiving morning just like I always do. The house was still quiet, but the soft light of dawn was creeping in through the kitchen window. I shuffled to the counter, wrapped in my old shawl, and started the kettle. I already had the sweet potato pie cooling on the counter, just like every year. It had been my tradition for as long as I could remember. My contribution to our family's Thanksgiving table. You see, every year it was me. Jasmine handled the turkey, Malcolm did the drinks, Talia made the playlist, and I brought the pie. It was my thing. My quiet, reliable role. This year, though, something felt off. I hadn't heard from Malcolm in days. No, just checking in, Ma. No final details about when he'd be coming to pick me up like we'd always done. First, I wasn't too worried. Malcolm, he's forgetful, but he's not cruel. I told myself he was just busy, running around trying to please Jasmine like he always did. But something nagged at me, something I couldn't shake. I dressed slowly, carefully like I always did. I put on my maroon cardigan, the one Malcolm always said brought out the gold in my skin. I pinned a little brooch to my chest, combed out my curls, and gave myself a quiet nod in the mirror. You still got it, Ruth, I thought to myself. I felt a little better, so I sat by the window, waiting. And waiting. The minutes stretched into hours. I watched the leaves swirl in the yard, the neighbors' grandkids running down the street with foil pans and ribbon-wrapped boxes. At 11:30 I reheated my coffee, but it didn't taste right. By 1 o'clock I poured it out. My phone sat face up on the table, staring back at me, no messages, no missed calls, no text saying they'd be late. By 3 o'clock, the pie had cooled to room temperature, and my fingers had stopped refreshing the call log. I called Malcolm. It went straight to voicemail. No message. I sat at the kitchen table, my heart sinking as the empty hours passed. It was getting harder to ignore the truth. He wasn't coming. I made myself a small plate, some leftover greens, a slice of ham, a scoop of macaroni, and lit the candle on the table beside the pie, just like I always did. My hands trembled, but I tried to keep calm. I whispered grace under my breath, hoping the prayer would settle the bitterness in my chest. But it didn't. By 5 p.m. I'd stopped pretending. The phone was still silent. I opened Facebook, my first mistake, and there it was. Photos. The photos of them, the perfect, happy family, sitting down at a table filled with food. There was Jasmine, smiling wide with her arm around Malcolm, standing in front of the turkey. The caption read, "So thankful for this beautiful life and our beautiful people #grateful #family first." Dozens of likes. Hundreds of comments. But not one mention of me. I clicked through the photos, my hands shaking. There was Talia, laughing with cousins I hadn't seen since Easter. There was Malcolm, pouring wine, and Jasmine, holding a pie plate that had once been mine, filled with someone else's dessert. The whole family laughing, so warm, so perfect. And then the comments. Where's Mama Langley? Miss Ruth didn't make the pie this year. Hit me. Hard. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had excluded me. Deliberately. They'd planned a meal where I wasn't even part of the picture. I stood up from the table, my chest tight, my throat dry. I had to get out of that room, away from the screen, away from the truth. But I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. For a moment I just stared. Not at them, but at the reflection of myself in the window. I wasn't just the old woman sitting alone at a table. I wasn't just the mother forgotten. I was a ghost in my own life, watching the world go by, knowing that no one saw me anymore. The tears came slowly, not loud, not dramatic, but soft and steady, like a quiet river in the night. I folded my napkin, placed it on the empty plate. And for the first time I let myself feel what I had been avoiding for so long. Betrayed. Invisible. Forgotten. The days after Thanksgiving passed in a blur, and the ache in my chest, though steady, began to dull into something less jagged. At first I couldn't quite make sense of it. I had spent so many years believing that family was everything, that my love, my sacrifices, my never-ending support for Daniel and his family would somehow be enough. But it wasn't. I wasn't enough. As the days stretched on, the reality set in. My family had made their decision. They had chosen the easy way out, the path that didn't include me. And while I had spent a lifetime bending over backward for them, now they were nowhere to be found. For years I had been the backbone, the quiet force behind every milestone, every holiday, every success. But none of that seemed to matter when it counted. I sat in the living room one morning, staring out the window as the frost on the glass made intricate patterns. The silence was heavy, too heavy, almost suffocating. My hands, once accustomed to the rhythm of working for others, now rested in my lap. I had a long time to think, too much time, really. I remembered all the things I had done for Daniel, how I had paid for his education, bought him his first car, helped with his house repairs. I had given him everything I had. I had been the one to scrape by, to make do, so he wouldn't have to struggle. And now, as I sat there alone, I understood that not one of those gestures had been returned. Not even a simple phone call, let alone the respect I had once hoped to receive. For years I had convinced myself that they would come around, that they would appreciate the years of sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the times I had put my own needs aside for theirs. But now that little voice inside me, the one I had silenced for so long, was telling me that it was time to stop. Enough was enough. I wasn't going to beg for their love anymore. I wasn't going to keep living in the shadows of their neglect. And more than anything, I wasn't going to let them continue to use me until there was nothing left. The wealth I had worked my entire life to build, the savings, the house, the retirement funds, had always been intended for them. But they didn't deserve it. Not anymore. I stood up, walking slowly to the little desk where I kept my important papers. There, in a drawer, was my will. The document that I had written years ago, when I believed in the idea of leaving everything to Daniel and his family. My heart twisted at the thought. But I knew now what I had to do. I called my lawyer, Helen. She had been with me through so many changes in my life, and she was one of the few people I trusted completely. Her voice was calm when she answered, as always. "Ruth, how are you?" she asked, but I could hear the concern in her tone. "I need to change my will," I said, cutting straight to the point. There was a long silence before she replied. "Okay, Ruth. I'll come to you tomorrow, first thing in the morning." I felt a strange calm settle over me. There was no hesitation in my decision anymore. I didn't need their money, their attention, or their approval. It was time to take control of my life. It was time to stop being the one who gave everything and received nothing in return. That night I sat down and made a list. A list of everything I had. My house, my savings, my bonds, my investments. All of it. For a moment I wondered if I was doing the right thing. But then I thought of the women at Haven House. The women who were forgotten by their families. The women who were left alone to fend for themselves in their later years. They were the ones who needed what I had. Not Daniel. Not Jasmine. Not Talia. I had spent so many years giving, believing that someday it would come back to me. But I had received nothing but silence. And now I would give it all away. The next morning, Helen arrived promptly at 9 a.m. Her usual calm presence brought a sense of peace as we sat down at the kitchen table. The same table where I had spent so many years making meals for Daniel and his family, where I had tended to their needs without ever asking for anything in return. We went through the paperwork, carefully reading over the terms of the new will. I struck through Daniel's name. I removed Jasmine entirely. Leah. I hesitated for a moment, but her silence in the face of all that had happened left me with no choice. She was no better than the others. Instead, I named the Haven House Shelter as the primary beneficiary. I had been donating to them for years, quietly helping women like me, women whose families had left them behind. Now I would leave them everything. My house, my savings, my bonds, everything. It wasn't a decision born out of anger. It was born out of clarity. I had spent too many years pretending that family meant something. Now I was choosing to make a difference in the lives of those who truly needed it. Helen didn't ask any questions. She didn't push me to change my mind. She simply helped me sign the documents and arranged for the necessary witnesses to sign as well. I felt lighter after the last signature was placed on the page. The house I had once thought would be Daniel's, The savings I had hoped to leave him for his children's future. All of it was now gone from his grasp. The moment it was done, I stood up and walked to the window. The cold November wind was blowing outside, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a warmth in my chest. I had done it. I had made the decision for myself. No more waiting, no more hoping. This was my life, and it was finally mine to live on my terms. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their love. I had a new sense of freedom, one that came with the peace of knowing that I had done the right thing. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel that peace. It had been a week since I had made the final decision to rewrite my will. My house, my savings, all of it, given to the women who truly needed help. It was done. But still something gnawed at me. My quiet house, the empty chair across the table, the weight of betrayal. It was all still there. It wasn't enough to just leave it behind. I needed to expose the truth to make sure they understood. The truth that they could no longer hide from me. I had been the silent one for far too long. I had been the one to swallow every insult, to bear the weight of every exclusion, to give and give until there was nothing left. But now I could no longer stay silent. They needed to see what they had done. They needed to know that I knew. I opened my laptop late one evening, the house quiet except for the hum of the heating system. The screen blinked to life, and I navigated to the Facebook group, the Langley family. The very same group where my image had been excluded, where my absence was celebrated without my knowledge. I wasn't just going to post a message. I was going to expose everything. Every moment of betrayal, every joke made at my expense, every single time I had been pushed aside. I took a deep breath and began to gather the evidence. I opened the screenshots, the ones I had saved, the ones where Jasmine had laughed at me behind my back, where they had joked about me being a burden, where they mocked my presence. Had them all. Every single conversation in that private family group. I found the photo of my empty table, the one I had taken on Thanksgiving night, alone, with my pie sitting untouched beside me. I stared at the photo. The empty chair. The untouched plate. The single candle flickering beside me. A reminder of everything I had given and everything I would never get back. I uploaded the screenshots one by one, the truth of their words laid bare. I added the photo of my empty table as the final blow. Then I wrote the message. This was my Thanksgiving. Waited. I cooked. And I was left alone. You made the choice to exclude me from your lives. And I have made mine. I have rewritten my will. My money, my years. All of it will now go to those who truly need it, not to the ones who have used me for convenience. I will no longer be a burden to you. I will no longer let you take from me. I stared at the screen for a long moment before clicking post. It felt surreal, but it also felt like the most freeing thing I had ever done. I wasn't looking for apologies. I wasn't looking for understanding. I wasn't even looking for them to feel sorry. This was about me. About finally standing up for myself, no longer invisible in the background. The silence that followed my post was deafening. For a moment I wondered if they even saw it. But then the notifications started rolling in. It wasn't just a handful of likes or comments. It was a storm. The family group went crazy. Aunt Bernice wrote first. Her words were full of disgust, of disbelief. "Malcolm, is this true?" she asked, the question dripping with a kind of shock I had never received when I needed it most. Then came Lisa, my cousin. "I'm ashamed. Ruth is my sister-in-law, and she's one of the most dignified women I know. To treat her this way, especially on Thanksgiving, is vile." And then my son, Malcolm. His words were frantic, rushed. "Mom, what is this? Can we talk privately? This isn't how it looks." I didn't respond immediately. What was there to say? I had given him everything. I had made his life easier. And now he was asking for privacy, for explanations. His silence in the face of my loneliness had been deafening. Now he wanted to sweep it all under the rug with a few words. But not this time. The messages kept coming in. Some were angry. Some were defensive. Jasmine, of course, tried to smooth things over. There are always two sides, she said. This year's Thanksgiving was hectic, and communication got lost in the shuffle. Lost in the shuffle. She had planned it. She and Malcolm both. Together. Talia finally wrote a message. It wasn't much, but it was something. Grandma, I know I can't undo what happened, but can I come see you? Just for a minute. I read her words over and over again. It was too little, too late. Silence had spoken louder than any apology ever could. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned off my phone and put it in the drawer. I didn't need to hear their excuses anymore. I had already said what needed to be said. My choice had been made. I was done with their lies and their games. The next morning I was at the shelter. I dropped off a donation and sat with the women who understood me better than my own family ever could. They had been left behind by their families too, just like me. But they were not invisible. Not here. I took a deep breath as I sat beside one of the women. This is where I belong, I whispered to myself, a quiet affirmation. For the first time, I felt the weight of years of guilt and sacrifice lift off my shoulders. I wasn't looking back. I wasn't going to be part of a family that didn't want me. And when I logged into Facebook one last time to check the family group, it was silent. No post, no updates, nothing. The last thing I saw was my own post, still there, still burning with truth. I clicked Leave Group. And just like that, it was over. The days after I posted my message were strange. There was a new kind of silence, one that was different from the quiet I had come to accept. This silence was louder, deeper, filled with tension and guilt that hung in the air like smoke. I didn't expect an apology. I didn't need one. What I had done wasn't about them. It was about me. But somehow I knew they would try. They always did when their comfort was at stake. The first to call was Daniel. I could see his name flashing on my phone, and my hand hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to answer, to hear him grovel, to listen to his weak excuses. But I knew better. I had heard it all before. His apology would be empty, and nothing would change. I let it ring out, watched the voicemail icon flash on the screen, and then turned the phone face down on the kitchen table. He tried again, and again. I didn't pick up. His words meant nothing to me anymore. I didn't need them. I had spent my whole life trying to be a good mother, but now I was done. Other family members began reaching out. It was a strange thing, knowing how many people had been watching. It wasn't just my immediate family that saw the post. No, it had spread beyond that, circulating among extended relatives and even people from old friendships. My story was no longer just my own. It had become a public one, a symbol of something bigger. A symbol of a woman who had been used, overlooked, and discarded. Talia, my granddaughter, messaged me next. She didn't try to call, thankfully. I wasn't ready for that, not yet. But her words were there, in black and white on the screen. Grandma, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I failed you. I saw the messages in the group chat. I saw the way I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up. I'm so sorry for not standing up for you, for letting them treat you like this. Please let me come see you just for a minute. I sat with those words for a long time. I wanted to believe that she understood. I wanted to believe that Talia, at least, had the sincerity to see the truth. But I knew better. Her apology came too late. The damage had been done. They had all made their choice, and it wasn't a choice I could undo. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I closed the message and set the phone down. Talia's words were an echo of the same old patterns. And I wasn't interested in playing along anymore. Then Daniel showed up. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock on the door, sharp and insistent. I hesitated before standing up. I knew it was him. I could feel it in my bones. I walked slowly to the door and peered through the window. There he was, holding a grocery bag in his hands. A pie, no doubt, his idea of an apology. For a moment I almost laughed. The thought of it. Daniel, standing at my door with a pie, as if that would undo the years of neglect. As if a pie could somehow fix what was broken. I opened the door, but I didn't let him in. "Mom," he said, his voice faltering. I brought this. I know it doesn't make up for what happened, but I'm really sorry. Can we talk? I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. And then I looked at the pie. He was trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed with food or words. His guilt was obvious, but it didn't move me. No, I said quietly and closed the door. He stood there for a moment, knocking again, calling my name, asking for a chance to talk. But I didn't open the door. I didn't need his words anymore. Not after everything. Talia called next. I didn't answer, but she left a message. Her voice was trembling, full of the kind of sorrow that made my stomach turn. Grandma, I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I should have stood by you. I should have said something. Please, I know it's too late, but please forgive me. Her tears, her pleas, they didn't matter. They never had. They were just more of the same. Words without action. I had heard them all before. The silence in my heart was louder than any apology she could offer. I spent the rest of the evening sitting in the living room, looking out the window at the darkening sky. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, but I ignored them all. The messages, the calls, the apologies, they no longer had any power over me. The family was in chaos. Daniel and Jasmine, feeling the pressure from everyone else, tried to smooth things over, but it was too late. The truth had been laid bare for all to see. They were exposed, and their guilt weighed heavy on them. They were ashamed. And that was something I could see. I could see it in their eyes, even if they tried to hide it with their actions. They had tried to use me. They had tried to keep me in my place, giving when it suited them and taking when they needed more. But not anymore. I knew they were scared. Scared of losing what they had gained from me. Scared of being publicly shamed. But their fear didn't concern me. I was finally free. The weeks following my decision felt like a weight had lifted from my chest, yet I was still left with something. An emptiness that had been filled for so long with the illusion of family. It had been hard to let go of the life I thought I was supposed to live. I had spent my days giving to others, investing my energy into relationships that, in the end, had nothing to offer me but more loneliness. I had been so focused on them, on my son, on my grandchildren, that I never stopped to ask myself what I truly needed. But now I was free. In the quiet of my home, I realized something profound. For so many years I had been defined by my role within my family, by the sacrifices I made for them. But now, without them, I was faced with a question I had never dared to ask before. What would I do with my life now? I knew I couldn't just be an observer. I couldn't sit idly by while other women suffered as I had. There had to be more to my story than this. And for the first time, I understood that my pain wasn't just my own. There were others out there. Other women who had been discarded, left behind, and forgotten by those they loved most. They, too, needed someone to tell them they weren't alone. I thought of the Haven House shelter. I had donated to them for years, but now I saw a new purpose in my connection to them. I needed to be more than just a donor. I needed to be part of their work, to be there for the women who, like me, had been pushed to the edges of their families, discarded as if they had nothing left to offer. I reached out to the shelter's director, Carla, and asked if I could get involved. She was thrilled, of course, and invited me to their annual winter dinner, a gathering for the women who had found refuge there. It would be my first time meeting these women face to face. I knew I had to do this not just for me but for them. As I walked through the doors of the shelter a few days later, the warmth of the place hit me immediately. It was nothing grand, just simple, but it was filled with women. Women who had nowhere else to go. Women whose lives had been torn apart by betrayal, abandonment, and neglect. Yet here they were, not broken but surviving. Carla led me around the shelter, introducing me to the women who lived there. Each one had her own story, her own pain, her own history of loss. I listened intently, and with every word, something inside me shifted. I had always thought that my suffering was unique, that I was the only one who had been left behind. But these women, they were just like me. They had been cast aside, but they still carried with them a strength, a quiet resilience that reminded me of my own. I met one woman, an older woman named Evelyn, who had been left by her children after her husband's death. I thought they'd take care of me, she said with a sad smile. But when I needed them most, they were gone. Her eyes were full of the same sorrow I had seen in my own reflection for so long. But there was something else there too, something I hadn't recognized until now. Hope. It wasn't just in Evelyn. It was in all of them. They had survived, and they had found a new kind of strength. That evening, Carla invited me to speak. I had agreed to share my story with the women. But now, standing before them, I realized how much more it had become. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about them. It was about all of us. And I knew I had a responsibility to be their voice. I stepped up to the podium, the weight of their eyes on me. For a moment, I felt the fear that had haunted me for so long, the fear of rejection, of being invisible. But then I thought of everything I had already faced. I had already been cast aside by the very people who should have loved me. I had already faced the pain of abandonment. And yet here I was. "I'm Ruth Langley," I began, my voice steady despite the nervousness I felt inside. "I was once just like you, left alone, discarded by those I loved. I gave everything to my family, my time, my love, my money. And when I needed them most, they were gone. But what I've come to realize is that this pain, it doesn't have to define me. I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor. And so are all of you." I paused, letting the words sink in. I wasn't just speaking to them. I was speaking to myself. This was the moment I had been waiting for. This was the moment when I could finally tell my story without shame. I've spent too many years living for others. I gave everything I had to my family, hoping that one day they would love me the way I loved them. But now I know the truth. My love was not a currency, and my sacrifices were not a transaction. I am more than that. And so are all of you. The room was silent, and then one woman, Evelyn, spoke up. "You're right," she said, her voice soft but firm. "We are more than the way they treated us. We are more than the way they left us." And just like that, something shifted. I realized that this was my new purpose. Not to fix what had been broken with my family, but to help these women find their voice, their strength. They didn't need to be rescued. They needed to be seen. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was being seen too. That night, I went to bed with a full heart. I had found a new mission. I was no longer just a mother or a grandmother. I was a woman with a voice. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. As the days passed since my speech at the shelter's winter gathering, I began to feel something shift inside me. It wasn't just the relief of sharing my story. It was the recognition that came from the women who had been there, listening. Their eyes, filled with empathy, understanding, and something I hadn't expected, gave me a strength I didn't know I had. They saw me. They heard me. And they didn't pity me. They respected me. In the weeks that followed, more and more women came to me. They shared their own stories, their struggles with loneliness, abandonment, and betrayal. They spoke of being forgotten by the very people who were supposed to love them, just like I had. But somehow, in their eyes, I saw something that was new to me: hope. They were still here. They were still fighting, still living. And that, in itself, was a victory. I had spent so much of my life trying to be someone for others, trying to hold together a family that had already fallen apart. But now I understood. I was no longer waiting for them to save me. I was here to save myself, and in turn, help those who had been left behind, just like I had. One afternoon, as I sat in the small, sunlit room at the shelter, Carla approached me with a warm smile. She had been watching how the women responded to me, how they began to see themselves in my journey, and how they started to find their own strength. "Ruth," she said softly, "we've been thinking. The shelter's growth has been incredible, but we still need more resources, more space, more support for women who've been forgotten by their families. You've inspired so many of them, and now, we could use your help to take it even further." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had been giving, yes, but in this moment I realized just how much I could offer. It wasn't about money or possessions anymore. It was about creating something bigger. Something that could offer what I never received. A place where women could rebuild, where they could find their worth again. I thought about it long and hard, but I already knew the answer. It was time to take the final step. I had already given my house and savings, but this would be my final act of transformation. I had something far more valuable than money. My voice, my story, and the ability to give hope. I called Carla the next morning, my decision made. I want to donate the rest of my savings to help expand the shelter, I told her, my voice steady but filled with resolve. There are so many more women who need what you're offering. I want to make sure the shelter can help as many as possible. Carla was speechless for a moment, and then she responded, her voice choked with emotion. Ruth, this will change everything. You have no idea how many lives you're going to touch with this. I smiled, a quiet warmth blooming inside me. I wasn't just changing my own life anymore. I was changing the lives of women who had faced the same heartache I had. Women who thought they were invisible, just like I once did. A few days later, I visited the shelter again. The women were preparing a small celebration to honor the donation, but it wasn't just about the money. It was about the message it sent. It was about rebuilding a sense of community, of family from the ground up. As I entered the common area, I was greeted by the familiar faces I had come to admire, each woman carrying her own story, her own pain, but also her own strength. They gathered around the table where Carla had prepared a modest meal. It wasn't the grandeur of a family dinner, but it was full of something I hadn't had in years. Warmth, belonging, and respect. Ruth, Carla said as she handed me a plate. This meal is for you. We're here because of you. You've shown us that we don't have to settle for being forgotten. Tears stung my eyes, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude. For the first time in years I felt like I belonged, like I was truly part of something. Not because I had given money, not because of what I owned, but because I had given of myself. I had shared my story, and in return I had found my true family. I took my seat at the table, surrounded by women who, like me, had once been lost but now found strength in each other. I looked around, and for the first time I didn't feel the ache of missing something. I didn't feel the pain of abandonment. Felt whole. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. I thought about the years I had spent trying to rebuild a family that never truly saw me. I thought about the countless sacrifices I had made, and how, in the end, none of it mattered. What mattered was the life I had now, the purpose I had found. I was no longer just surviving, I was living, truly living. And I realized something else. I didn't need my old family to define me anymore. I had built something stronger, something that wasn't based on blood, but on mutual respect, love, and support. I was no longer the one waiting for them to see me. I was the one showing others that they, too, had a voice. In that moment, I felt freer than I had ever felt in my life. I had finally closed the chapter on the family that never truly saw me. I had released the past with grace, and in its place, I had created something beautiful. A new life, full of purpose and meaning. I didn't need to look back anymore. My future was waiting, and for the first time it was mine to create.